Alright, so this is the second half of the tutorial about groups and components. So this would be tutorial number 2, but part B, like using groups and components. So first thing I want to do is draw a rectangle once again. And you'll notice down below here that in this SketchUp I'm using meters once again. And you can see that we have quite a bit of play in it, like 2.57 meters by 0.74. Just to make this nice and easy, let's go ahead and just make, while it's moving, I haven't clicked twice yet. I'm just going to type 2, comma, 0.5. So that gives me, when I hit enter, that gives me a rectangle here that's 2 meters across and then a ½ meter wide here, which is 50 centimeters. We can actually make this even easier for ourselves so that we're not having to do too much kind of mental conversion, or you can pick the units that you most like or whatever's easiest for you. If you come up here to Window, then you click on Model Info, it gives you all the information of basically what your drawing is. And we can go down here to units. So these are the units of measurement. And for this, we can go ahead and keep it in meters, but if I click here, you see that you have other options. And actually, I think centimeters are pretty easy to work with. So let's go ahead and click on centimeters. We'll keep it in decimal so that we can say like 1.5 if we need to. But we don't need this degree of precision, 0.00. That's pretty small. We don't need to be that small. And for this, since we're already using centimeters, we're not going to make anything today with the precision of using millimeters. So let's just click on the lowest precision or the largest precision in this case, being 0 centimeters. And this way, when we make rectangles, we can just think about how big it is through centimeters. We don't have to worry about ½ centimeters or anything else. So then, once again, if I was going to make a rectangle, you'll notice down here, 118 centimeters by 54 centimeters. Well, hopefully you all remember that there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So if we want to make this same size rectangle here, we would just type 200 centimeters, comma, 50 centimeters. So that's the same as 2 meters by a ½ meter. But it's just easier to think about. And I know those two look different, but it's just the perspective. SketchUp does use single point, vanishing point perspective, so things that are closer to us look bigger than the things further away, but that's just the perspective that we talked about in that first intro unit. They are exactly the same size. So that's just something to keep in mind. Whenever you open SketchUp, it might be in different units than you want to be using. You can go up to that point, you can go up to that point and change whatever units you have. So I went ahead and deleted one box because I just want to have one here for now. I'm going to triple click on it so that I can move it over just to kind of keep things framed easier. You don't have to move this if you don't want to, but it's easier for me while I'm filming to keep things close. So I'm going to do exactly what I did last tutorial, in which I have my rectangle here. I haven't made it a group yet. I want to go ahead and give it some height first. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this up, and let's just make it a fairly tall wall. I'm going to make it 2 meters tall, or 200 centimeters tall once again. So 200 centimeters, enter, and that gives me this rectangle that's 2 meters tall, 2 meters across, and a ½ meter wide. And before I do anything else, I'm going to triple click on it, make it a group, and this is where we left off from last tutorial. We now have this group that we can move around or make changes to, and just like we learned earlier in class, we can make copies of it. So if you hit now that it's just a group, we can click on it once. We can click the move button, and if I hold down option and then click that corner, I can drag that corner over, and now I have 2 groups. So again, this is very handy for us. Like I showed you in that last tutorial, we have 2 groups. Now we can't corrupt these things. They can overlap, and it doesn't really cause major problems in the sense that it's easy to fix. We can just kind of bring that back over. We have these two groups now that will not relate to each other. And the advantage of having groups is that each of these groups are independent of each other. They are identical at this point because we just made a copy of it, but I can make changes to one without making changes to the other. So let's practice what we did last time. I'm gonna pretend I'm making like a sculpture for a park, so something that kids can climb on, and I'm gonna cut some holes into this to kind of create little windows that they can look through. So I'm gonna go in here and make some changes, and on this face, let's cut some windows like we did last time, but instead of using just rectangles, let's go ahead and just cut some circles into this face. So I'm in this face, I can make changes to it, and whatever I want to do, that would be fine. So notice if I go into the shape, I have these different faces, and if I want to cut windows into them, once again, I use push-pull, zoom in a little bit to make it easier, and I just push it in, and I might have to zoom in a bit further. Push on it until it says, there it is, the on face. That lets us cut right through it. So I can push it all the way back until it says on face, but knowing that this is a half meter wide or 50 centimeters, I can also just start pushing and then type in 50 centimeters and hit enter, and because it's the same distance, it just automatically cuts that hole in it. So that's one of the advantages of knowing how wide your walls are or whatever you're working with, is it makes it easy to work on. And notice that whatever changes I made to this group, it didn't make those same changes into this group. That's because they are separate groups. They're not part of the same kind of, they're not unified, and that's going to be the difference between components, but I'll come back to that. So I have these two identical walls, but this one I've cut some circles into. This one, let's go ahead, and now that we're in that group, we can draw into it. Let's go ahead and draw some polygons. So I'm just going to click, oops, and you can kind of play with your polygon tool. Doesn't really matter, we're just kind of cutting shapes at random right now. So once again, we have these different shapes drawn into this group, and I'm going to push pull, and because I know the depth, I'm just going to offset it 50 centimeters. Oops, escape. So what I did there is I was still selected on that face from the previous one, so I accidentally undid what I just did. So let's try that again. So I went up to edit, undo. So I come back here, click on this face, push pull, 50 centimeters, push it in, 50 centimeters. And that makes it very easy to create these different shapes. So that is what groups lets us do. We can make identical copies of things, but then we can make changes to them independently without them making the same changes to each other. And the reason I point that out is in a second I'm going to make components which will be the opposite of that. You make a change to one and it makes that same change to the other. So with groups, these are independent of each other. I can move one independent of the other without it having any problems. And so let's say we're going to have this in a park. I'm going to have these two walls next to each other for kids to climb on, and I like where they are. I can even highlight both of them, see that they're both highlighted in blue now, and I can even make both groups part of a larger group. So you can see now I click one and it highlights both. So now when I move this, they move as a set. So you can do that with anything in SketchUp as well. You can make groups within groups, and then you just have to keep track of how many groups you're running here. So we have one large group, I double click on it, now you can see that invisible cube going around both. So if I want to make changes, I have to go into each group. So inside this larger group, I now have two smaller groups, And if I want to make changes, I have to, again, click into the smaller group, which is inside the larger group. So let's say I want to make another circle here. You go into these, oops. I'm just going to undo. We don't need that other circle there. 50 centimeters. And I'll put another circle here. Trim on this face, make a circle. I think you get the point. And again, it's kind of having a hard time too far zoomed out for it to really pick it up easily, so I'm just going to say 50. And again, so now we have the group that's larger, inside of which we have two smaller groups. If you ever need to separate these groups, like if you don't want these two to be combined anymore, you can just right click, say explode, and notice that it no longer has the groups tied together. They're now once again independent of each other. So I can move them separately. For now though, I want to go ahead and keep them as one big group because I want to move these out of the way a little bit. So I've made the group. I want to move it. I'm just going to move it to the other side of the guy here. So drag it and move it over. Try to keep it along your red axis just to kind of keep things in a line. So that is what groups are used for. If you're making a house or if you're making cabinets or furniture or whatever and you want to have different objects that are similar, you can make copies of each other, but that way you can make changes independently. So what I was saying before is that this is a little different than what components are. So again, let's make another set of components and we'll make them the same size. So we had 200 centimeters, comma 50 centimeters, so 2 meters by 1/2 meter. So the same size there. We'll bring it up 2 meters as we did before, so 200 centimeters. So now this is the same. Triple click on it, but this time, instead of saying make group, I'm going to make this a component. So it lets you name it, and we're going to call this wall 1. Just, you can name it anything though. Components are really handy if you're making some pretty intricate things that are going to be similar to each other, like if you're making furniture or cabinets, you can keep track of all your components. So once we type that in, I'm just going to say create for now. And you'll notice this is very similar to a group. I click on it once, it highlights everything. If I want to make changes, I have to double click on it to get into it. And just like a group, I click on it once here and say option, or first let's click move, and then say option. I can make copies of it just like I did groups. However, the difference now is that components are essentially tied to each other. You'll notice when I double click on one of these components, it highlights both components. So whatever changes I make to one, it makes an automatic change to the other. Again, this is really handy, like if you're making, let's say you're making furniture, or you're making bookshelves or cabinets, and you're going to have 6 shelves that are all identical to each other. You make those shelves components, and then as you adjust one, it automatically adjusts the other. And components will be used in this class. It's something that you will play with a little bit because they can be really useful, just like groups are useful for other reasons. So let's try this. Let's go ahead, click on one face here, and let's just make a line starting at the midpoint. So I've clicked on the pencil, I hover over this line until I find the blue midpoint, I click once, I drag it across, and it automatically snaps to the other midpoint. I make a line, and you'll notice now that we've basically divided our shape in half. And just to show you what you can do now. So now we have two faces on this face. So let's push this in just a little ways. So I'm going to click on this face. I'm going to push, and let's take it in half the distance. So we have a 50 centimeter wall. Let's push it in 25 centimeters. And so now we have kind of a little shelf built in to our shape here. And you'll notice that automatically it makes the same shape over here. Again, if you're making cabinets or furniture or even making walls for a house and you're adjusting the thickness of your walls, if they're all the same component, then as you adjust one, it adjusts the other automatically. And just like groups, you just have to make sure you click into those groups to make changes to it. If I wanted to cut a window here, I'm just going to put a circle. If I tried to put a circle on this shape and did that, remember that I'm on the outside of the group, and all I really did here was draw on top of that component. I didn't do anything to make changes to it. It's just the circle that's on top of my face. It didn't make any changes to that face, so I need to delete that. So I do want to make some circles here. I double click on it. I can highlight that face. I can put a circle here. And if I hover again, I can find the midpoint and then carefully drag down a little ways. Click once, make a circle, and you'll notice that there's automatically a circle on the other side. So I'm going to select that circle. I'll select the push-pull. And if I push it back a little ways, I should be able to find that on face and click, or I know it's 25 centimeters, so you could just type in 25 centimeters here, that offset, and it automatically makes that hole in it. So that's what components do for you. Whatever you do with one, it does to the other, and it lets you kind of lets you work a little faster if you need to. And just like our other options, like I showed you before, just like these two are a group, I can do the same thing over here. I could, once I get these two where I like them, I could select both, so I can either drag and try to select both, although I'm too close right now. So the other option is just to hold down Shift, click one here, click one here, let go of Shift, right click, make a group, and now these two are a group the same way our other two are a group. And it lets you play around with that a little bit. Oops, edit, undo, move. And this is pretty convenient. And what we can also do, if let's say we want to make all of these groups, like one group, like it's going to be part of a park together, I can explode. I can explode. Oops. I just said edit group on accident, so explode. And now they're all independent of each other, so I can drag them closer to each other. I can move them around if I want to. I could reorder them if I want to. So I can move that one over, move this one over. Oops. And that is how you make groups and components. If I wanted to then make all of those groups, although I think I have my old man in there too, which I don't want to have, so I'm just going to move this one over once again, just to get him off the old man. So here we have these two, which are components, these two, which are groups, and if I want to, I can make all of them. So if I get my box around all four completely, it highlights all four. I'll say make a group, and now I have all four of these are groups. And then once again, if I want to, hold down Shift, click. I'm going to make those two a group just for my own organizational sake. So I have my big group. Within it, I have my components, which are part of a smaller group. And then over here, these two are just independent of themselves. But if I want to, I can go ahead, hit Shift, make those groups too. So larger group, double click, smaller group, double click, individual groups. And then over here, double click, individual components. So I would like you guys to do this same thing for this Part B tutorial. I want to see you make two objects that are groups, and you have done something to independently draw within those groups. So you have two objects that are copies of one group, and you've made different changes, so cut different windows in both of these. And then you have also two components which are identical to each other, and I want you to cut holes in them. So if you can make yours look like mine, that would be perfect. And if you have that, you complete tutorial number 2, the differences between groups and components. And get that loaded up to Moodle, please. Thank you.